If you're not mortified by this, well then you should be. So just the other day, we had the outcome of the trade talks between the US, with Donald Trump at the helm, and the European Union, the EU, with the Ursula von der Leyen going to bat for us. And let's just say the outcome was not great for the Europeans. In fact, it's not that it wasn't great. It was absolutely catastrophic. It was abysmal. The EU, the European Union, this great, grand, glorious empire that they're trying to build, got absolutely shellacked by the Americans. And this, to me, just copper fastens my views on the EU project. Here's my quick snapshot of the runners and riders. The United States, with its can-do, get stuck in, make things happen, and just get the damn job done attitude with regards to ingenuity, cognivity, and merit.
Booster coming in hot for booster touch. We're going to ignite 13 of those Raptor engines, and this view is incredible right now. You can see how fast this vehicle is moving on the left-hand screen. Landing burn, ignited. We're now down to 3 Raptor engines. We can see those chopsticks now in the rear.
And here's the European Union's approach, and there's never enough bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is our friend. There can never be enough rules, can never be enough laws, can never be enough bylaws. And we have to protect everybody and anybody from everything and anything at all given times from now till eternity. Yes, if you live in the EU like I do for my sins, probably in a past life, you will know that's way more true than you'd like to admit. Okay, so Trump was threatening 30% tariffs, I'm sure you know this. And the outcome of the deal was that they'll be allowed, they've agreed to impose 15% tariffs on EU goods. Coming to the United States. Now, bear in mind, guys, that the UK, who left the EU, they got a deal of 10% tariffs. So the UK, Britain, which is on its own, left the EU, they got a 50% better deal than the European Union, this great empire that they keep telling us is stronger together and we're all, it's a massive trading bloc and 500 million people. We're great and powerful, and we're really up there in the world, and we're not. No, the European Union, this just proved to me that the European Union is a massive, bloated bureaucracy. In very simple terms, I see the EU in its current form as a giant civil service. Any civil service, not the Irish one, not the French one, not the Italian one, any civil service where mediocrity is the order of the day. You have mediocre people at best, sometimes completely incompetent people in the system, and they rise up through the system almost by osmosis. Getting promoted because they're the last person there or the senior person there, or because they're on some kind of quota for gender or ethnicity, whatever, religion, sexuality. All this sort of nonsense goes on. Merit is not the order of the day. And the EU is the encapsulation of that whole ethos, where you have a massive, bloated bureaucracy, jam-packed to the rafters with mediocre people, incompetent people, and at the top of it all, you have somebody like Ursula von der Leyen, a failed German politician. And the TLDR on Mrs. von der Leyen, she essentially was a failed German politician. She was Minister for Defence and other things. She was a thorn in the side constantly for Angela Merkel. She was always getting into embarrassing situations and scandals, and she was Minister for Defence, and the German armed forces are in a complete and utter shambles, and she certainly didn't help matters, probably made it a lot worse. So Ursula von der Leyen was for my Irish viewers, she was the German version of Pádraig Flynn. Now, you know Pádraig Flynn, if you're Irish. He was rubbish. He was an embarrassment, a constant thorn in the side. He was, every time he came out, he would say something stupid or make a show of himself. And what they did was, with Pádraig Flynn, they promoted him. He was minister for various things. Because he was from the west of Ireland, they kind of have to, they were trying to spread the jobs around, so even the duds had to get something. And that's the way politics works. So eventually he just became too much of a problem. So they essentially promoted him to Brussels. Yeah, they sent him off as our guy in Brussels. Back when Brussels didn't matter. That's where you sent the idiots. You know, if somebody was useless to the point of, well, we really would rather they weren't. They're just getting in the way of everything. You promoted them to Brussels as an EU commissioner, or it was EEC back then, commissioner or whatever. So Ursula von der Leyen was the German version of Pádraig Flynn. Angela Merkel wanted shut of her, wanted to get rid of her. And as it turned out, they were changing the guard in the whole big EU Commission thing and divvying out all the big jobs. And the Germans, of course, the Germans and the French, they get dibs on all the real top jobs because they're essentially running the show. So the Germans had to pick someone. They picked a couple of people, didn't really get that through for various reasons. And then Angela Merkel saw her chance to shove in this dud, Ursula von der Leyen, to get rid of her. Essentially, just wanted her out of her hair. So she stuck her in that role in the EU at the top job, promotion, which served everybody in the Bundestag very well, because at least she was no longer their problem. But unfortunately, she became our problem. And what happens is you end up with a lot of Ursula von der Leyen types floating around the system in this big bloated bureaucracy. And they're all rubbish. They're all crap. They're duds. And they just move in their own circles and they clap each other on the back. But when they get into a room with adults, with real adults who have a mission and take no prisoners, then that's where the lie is exposed with these types of people. They just crumple like an empty paper bag. They're just rabbits in the headlights. Just look at this clip of Ursula von der Leyen and Donald Trump and look at the body language. Just forget about the words and forget about the whole Trump thing. I'm not going there today. You love him or loathe him. This is not that video. Look at the body language. The US has Trump in there. Now, you can say he's a rough diamond, and he is in many ways, but he's a tough negotiator. You can't take that away from the chap. And we have this rabbit in the headlights. That's who we're sending into bat for us. And this is your meritocracy versus your civil service. It's just no contest. So out of all of this negotiation, and I assume whatever team Ursula von der Leyen had with her were just carbon copies in various forms of herself. They were mediocre at best, a bit crap, a bit not that good, not that savvy. They certainly, as the results show, were no match for the Americans. Absolutely not at the races. The outcome of the negotiations, it was an absolute embarrassment. An absolute embarrassment. The Europeans, the EU, were just rolled over. They were shellacked. And they were made to look absolutely foolish. And that's a terrible thing to say, because we are, as you know, Ireland is shackled to this project. And the EU, as far as I'm concerned, it reminds me at this point of a late stage empire, like, let's say, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. By the end of their tenure, this First World War type years, they essentially had become big, bloated, massively bureaucratic, a whole panoply of different ethnicities. And so on paper it looked huge, loads of people, loads of population, etc. But functionally it was an absolute mess. The thing was rotted from the inside. And of course, when the real test came, when they had to go and play with the big kids, they just crumpled. They just were shown up to be absolutely dysfunctional on many levels. The whole thing was a quagmire. And it had gotten that way over years, and eventually it ended up dysfunctional. And that's usually what happens to empires. And the EU is just fast-tracked that. It didn't take centuries with the EU. The thing was based on some very, very flawed logic, in my opinion. This one-size-fits-all for an entire continent with a lot of different people is a bad plan from the start, because you've no ethos. And secondly, this attempt to pass more and more and more draconian laws in order to stifle public debate about the project, that's always a bad plan. And the EU seems to be, if it's good at anything, it's creating endless reams of red tape, laws, spurious directives. It's bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake. And that's why it's failing, and that's why, in my opinion, it will fail in one form or another. It'll either implode completely or it will fragment into various blocks. I don't know which way it goes. It's not really my thing. This is just a layman's take. But from the layman's perspective, we came out of this big negotiations with nothing. The EU came out with nothing. They bowed down like a child, like a bold child that's been chastised. They bowed down to the might of America. And bear in mind, when the EU was getting going, we were nearly, economy-wise and size, nearly the size of America. There wasn't much in it. The EU now is half the size of the American economy. Half. So the EU is the sick man of the world stage. You've America forging ahead one side, you've China forging ahead the other side, and you have the EU in the middle that's just caught up in endless reams of red tape and bureaucracy and civil service-ness. And that's why it's just dying on its arse. And if ever you needed proof, it's the outcome of these negotiations. It wasn't even close. The Americans still slapped a 15% tariff on the EU, and in addition to that, the EU has signed up to buy hundreds of billions of American product, or liquid natural gas. You have American chips going into all the giga factories and stuff like that in the EU. They basically had to sign up to a load of stuff that they would buy from America, in addition to being slapped with the tariff anyway, while the UK only has a 10% tariff, and that's going to be good for Northern Ireland. Watch that space. That's going to be interesting, because they're still in the UK, but they have access through the shenanigans of Brexit to the EU market. So that's going to be an interesting little aside. But if ever you had a doubt, and I didn't have a doubt, that the EU is a failed project, this is proof positive. They just got rolled over. There's no ifs, buts, or ands. It's black and white. We got reamed. We just got bent over, togs pulled down, and that's it. And thanks, Ursula von der Leyen, you absolute legend. But that's where the EU is. We are the sick block, if you like, of the world at the moment. And it's only going to get worse.